The first time I realized my family had already decided my future without me, it was during a Christmas luncheon I wasn't even supposed to attend. I was standing in my sister-in-law's kitchen, holding a ceramic platter warm from the oven, when my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. The vibration was sharp and insistent, completely out of place among the soft hum of Christmas music and the polite laughter drifting in from the dining room. I ignored it at first. That was my mistake. Across the room, my younger brother Mark lifted his glass and cleared his throat. The sound cut through the chatter like a blade. Conversations stalled. Forks paused midair. He smiled in that practiced way he used whenever he was about to say something that would change the temperature of the room. I just want to say he announced that next year is going to look very different for this family. My mother leaned forward immediately, eyes bright, already nodding before she knew what he was about to say. My father straightened in his chair, pride radiating from him like heat. Mark continued, "With the house consolidation almost finalized, we're finally streamlining things. No more loose ends. Everything will be under one roof." A few people clapped. Someone murmured about time. I felt a strange tightening in my chest. House consolidation. That was not a phrase anyone had used around me. My phone buzzed again. This time I glanced down. The caller ID read Silverline Title Services. My fingers went cold. I stepped back away from the kitchen island, my mind already racing through possibilities. Title companies did not call on Christmas afternoons unless something was very wrong or very urgent. Mark raised his glass higher. Family should move as one, he said. Shared assets, shared future. My mother smiled at him like he'd just quoted scripture. That was when I answered the phone. I didn't step outside. I didn't lower my voice. I tapped speaker because something deep in my bones told me I would need witnesses. "This is Evelyn Hart," I said. There was a brief pause on the line, followed by a woman's professional but strained voice. "Miss Hart, thank you for answering. My name is Denise Walker from Silverline Title. I'm sorry to disturb you on a holiday, but we need immediate confirmation regarding a property transfer that was initiated earlier today." The dining room fell silent. I could feel my mother's eyes on me. I could feel Mark's smile freeze. "What property?" I asked. "The residential property located on Maple Ridge Drive," Denise said. "We received documentation authorizing sale and transfer listing you as the principal with your brother Mark Hart, acting under power of attorney." The platter slipped from my hands and clattered onto the counter. I stared straight ahead, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear my own voice. "I did not authorize a sale," I said slowly, "and I have not granted anyone power of attorney." The silence in the room turned heavy, oppressive. My mother stood abruptly. "Evelyn," she hissed, "what are you doing?" Denise cleared her throat. "That's exactly why I'm calling. We flagged inconsistencies in the authorization file. Before we proceed any further, I need you to verbally confirm whether you are selling your home." I didn't look at Mark. I didn't look at my parents. "No," I said, "I am not." The line went quiet for a moment. "Thank you," Denise replied. Her tone shifted crisp and official. "We are freezing the file immediately and escalating this to our fraud review department. Please expect follow-up within the next 24 hours. The call ended. I lowered the phone. Mark let out a short laugh. "This is ridiculous," he said. "It's just a clerical misunderstanding." My mother's face had gone pale. "Evelyn, why would you say that?" she demanded. "Mark was handling things for the family." "For the family," I repeated. My father finally spoke. His voice was calm, measured the voice he used when closing business deals. "You're being emotional. This was always the plan. You just didn't need to be burdened with the details." I looked at them then, really looked. I was 32 years old. I had purchased my home alone. I paid every mortgage installment. I covered the taxes, the insurance, the repairs. That house was not a symbol. It was proof. Proof that I existed beyond my family's expectations. And yet, here they were, standing around a Christmas table, acting as if my life were a communal resource. "You were selling my house," I said. Mark sighed theatrically. "We were repositioning it, leveraging equity. You wouldn't understand. You've always played it safe." The old words, the familiar dismissal. I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger, not shock. Clarity. My entire life I had been the reliable one, the one who didn't need help, the one who didn't make scenes, the one who absorbed pressure so everyone else could pretend things were fine. That role had just ended. "I'm leaving," I said. My mother grabbed my arm. "Don't be dramatic. We can talk about this after dinner." "There is nothing to talk about," I replied, gently removing her hand. "You crossed a line you can't uncross." Mark scoffed. "You'll calm down, you always do." I paused at the doorway and turned back. This time I said, my voice steady, "You're wrong. I walked out into the cold afternoon, my breath visible in the air, my heart hammering, but my mind razor sharp. Because somewhere between the sound of a title company's voice and the silence of my family's betrayal, I understood something fundamental. They thought they had taken control. They had no idea what they had just started. I did not drive straight home after leaving my parents' house. I couldn't. The idea of sitting alone in my living room surrounded by furniture. I had chosen walls. I had painted floors. I had scrubbed on my hands and knees, felt unbearable. Not because it wasn't mine, but because someone had tried to erase that truth without even asking me. I drove until the Christmas decorations blurred into streaks of white and red along the highway. I drove until the radio stations faded into static. I drove until my hands stopped shaking. I ended up in a grocery store parking lot, the kind that stayed open on holidays because loneliness didn't respect calendars. I parked far from the entrance and just sat there, forehead resting against the steering wheel, breathing. What hurt most wasn't the attempted theft. It was the assumption. They hadn't argued with me. They hadn't negotiated. They hadn't even warned me. They had simply decided that my stability was excess, that my home was available, that my consent was optional. And the worst part was how familiar that felt. I was the older sister by 4 years, the responsible one, the one who never needed rescuing. When Mark failed out of his first college program, my parents blamed the school. When he quit his second job in 6 months, they blamed management. When he borrowed money and didn't pay it back, they blamed stress. When I succeeded, they called it luck. When I struggled quietly, they didn't notice. I had learned early that the reward for competence was invisibility. That was why I built my life the way I did. Quietly, methodically, with no witnesses and no debts of gratitude. I never asked for help. I never shared numbers. I never told them how much I had saved or how close I was to paying off my mortgage early. I thought that discretion was protection. I was wrong. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket and opened my email. There it was. A new message from Silverline titled time-stamped minutes after I left the house. Subject: urgent verification required. I opened it. The message was polite, clinical, and devastating. They had received a power of attorney document bearing my name and signature. It authorized Mark Hart to sell, refinance, or otherwise manage my property on Maple Ridge Drive. The document had been notarized electronically and recorded earlier that week. While my mother had been calling to ask if I was eating enough. While my father had been sending me links to articles about smart investing. While Mark had been texting me memes and asking if I'd be home for Christmas. My signature had been forged. I stared at the screen until the words stopped feeling real. Then something in me clicked. I had spent 10 years working in compliance for a regional healthcare administrator. My job wasn't glamorous, it wasn't public-facing, but it was precise. I investigated anomalies. I followed audit trails. I identified vulnerabilities before they turned into lawsuits. Fraud didn't scare me. Sloppiness did. I straightened in my seat and opened a new note on my phone. Step 1, confirm facts. I drove home. When I unlocked my front door, the familiar scent of clean wood and citrus cleaner greeted me. I stood there for a moment, keys still in my hand, grounding myself in the physical reality of the space. This was mine. I set my bag down, took off my coat, and opened my laptop. The county recorder's website was clunky but functional. I searched by address. There it was. A recorded document dated 3 days earlier. Power of attorney. Grantor Evelyn Hart. Grantee Mark Hart. I clicked the scanned image. My name was printed clearly. My address was correct. The legal language was dense and professional. And the signature at the bottom was almost perfect. Almost. Anyone else would have missed it. Anyone else would have seen my name written in a familiar looping script and assumed it was real. But I knew my hand. I never crossed my lowercase t. I always did a short tail on the Y in my first name. This signature was too neat, too careful, like someone imitating me instead of being me. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was premeditated. I scrolled down to the notary section. The stamp was from an online notary service based 2 counties away. The name meant nothing to me, but the commission number was valid. Valid enough to pass a superficial check. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. I could picture it now. Mark, confident and careless, convinced that if the paperwork looked official enough, reality would bend around it. My parents nodding along, telling themselves it was for the good of the family. None of them had considered what would happen if I said no. I opened my credit monitoring app next. There it was. A hard inquiry from a home equity lender dated 2 days earlier. They weren't just selling my house. They were trying to drain it. I laughed then. a short, sharp sound that startled me in the quiet room. So that was the urgency. That was the Christmas deadline. Mark hadn't suddenly developed an interest in long-term planning. He needed cash fast. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I made coffee and sat back down. Because here was the thing my family had never understood about me. I wasn't emotional when I was hurt. I was methodical. I opened a folder on my desktop and labeled it simply Maple Ridge. Inside it, I saved copies of everything. The recorded document, the email from the title company, screenshots of the credit inquiry. I backed it up to the cloud and to an external drive. Then I drafted a timeline. When the document was recorded, when the inquiry was made, when Mark had started asking strange questions about my mortgage months earlier, patterns emerged quickly. This wasn't desperation, it was escalation. And escalation always led to mistakes. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Evelyn, please call me. Your father is very upset. Mark is beside himself. This is all getting blown out of proportion." I stared at the message. Beside himself. Not ashamed, not apologetic. Upset. I typed back one sentence. "Do not contact me again until I speak with a lawyer." The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then silence. Good. I opened my contacts and scrolled until I found the name I needed. Laura Mitchell. Real estate attorney. Mid-40s. Ruthless in a quiet way. We had worked together once during a regulatory review. I trusted her. I hesitated only a moment before calling. She answered on the third ring. "Laura Mitchell." "Laura, this is Evelyn Hart," I said. "I need you tonight." There was a pause. "Then tell me what happened." As I spoke, laying out the facts, the emotion I had been holding at bay finally began to shift. Not into tears, but into resolve. By the time I finished, Laura was quiet for a long moment. "This is serious," she said finally, "and sloppy, which is good for you." "What do we do?" I asked. "We don't confront them again," she said. "Not yet. We let them think you're rattled. We gather evidence, and we make sure that when this comes apart, it comes apart cleanly." I looked around my living room at the framed photos, the throw blanket folded just so the houseplants I'd kept alive for years. "They think this is about money," I said. Laura gave a dry laugh. "They always do." I closed my eyes. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about erasing the version of me they preferred. And I was done letting them. Laura called me back just after midnight. I was still sitting at my kitchen table, untouched coffee, cold in its mug, my laptop glowing with documents and timelines. The house was silent in that deep way only winter nights manage the kind of quiet that makes every thought echo louder. "I ran a preliminary search," Laura said. "Your brother is in deeper trouble than you think." I closed my eyes. How deep? 2 personal loans, she said. One unsecured, one collateralized against a vehicle. Both delinquent. And there's a civil complaint filed last month that hasn't been served yet. If he gets served, his credit collapses. He needed liquidity fast. So that was it. This wasn't ambition. It was panic dressed up as strategy. My family hadn't woken up one day and decided to optimize assets. They had decided to sacrifice mine to plug a hole they created. "And my parents?" I asked. Laura hesitated. "Your mother's name appears on one of the loan documents as a co-signer." The air left my lungs in a slow, controlled exhale. Of course she was. She had always stepped in front of consequences for Mark. Always softened the landing. Always absorbed the impact. "She knew," I said quietly. "She knew enough," Laura replied. "And that matters." I hung up after we agreed on next steps. No police report yet. No cease and desist. Silence was leverage. People made their worst mistakes when they thought the danger had passed. I finally went to bed sometime after 2 in the morning, but sleep came in shallow, fractured pieces. I dreamed of paperwork chasing me down long hallways. I woke before dawn with a clarity that surprised me. If my family believed they could manage my life without my consent, they were about to learn exactly how carefully I had built it. I showered, dressed, and went to work as if nothing had happened. That was the part that shocked me most. I could compartmentalize. I had learned to do it years ago. Pain went into one box, function went into another, and function always won. By mid-morning, my phone started buzzing again. Missed calls, voicemails, text messages from my mother, from my father, from my aunt who specialized in guilt disguised as concern. I ignored them all. At noon, a new message came through from Mark. "Evelyn, this has gone too far. You embarrass the family. Call me so we can straighten this out like adults." I stared at the message, then forwarded it to Laura. Her reply came quickly. "Good. He thinks he still has authority. Let him." That afternoon, I logged into my county property tax portal and pulled every document associated with my home. Deeds, amendments, historical filings. I wanted to understand exactly how vulnerable the record had been. That was when I remembered something important. I hadn't bought the house in my personal name. 3 years earlier, after watching a colleague lose everything in a divorce she never saw coming, I had created a revocable living trust. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't expensive, it was just prudent. The property deed listed the trust as owner. I was the trustee, which meant something very specific. A power of attorney in my personal name meant nothing. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile forming despite myself. Mark had forged authority he didn't even need to attempt, because the asset he was trying to steal wasn't structured the way he assumed. He had been operating on an outdated mental image of me, the younger sister, the predictable one, the woman who didn't think ahead. That assumption was about to cost him everything. At 3 p.m, Laura sent me a secure email. Silverline Title has agreed to hold the transaction pending verification. They're nervous. The notary's credentials are being reviewed. Do not contact your family. Let them escalate. I forwarded the message to my private folder and closed my laptop. I knew Mark. Silence would drive him insane. Sure enough, by early evening, my mother showed up at my front door. I saw her through the peephole, coat-buttoned, wrong hair hastily brushed, holding a casserole dish like a peace offering. I didn't open the door. She knocked again harder. "Evelyn," she called, "please, we need to talk." I stood on the other side of the door, my heart hammering but my posture steady. "We can't do this over lawyers," she said through the wood. "This is family." That word again. Family. The justification for every boundary crossed and every betrayal excused. "I know you're scared," she continued. "Mark is under so much pressure. He was trying to fix things. By stealing my house, I asked my voice calm but loud enough to carry." There was a pause. "He wouldn't put it that way," she said weakly. "That's the problem," I replied. Silence stretched between us. Then quietly, "If you don't help him, everything falls apart." I closed my eyes. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about the structure collapsing around her. I unlocked the door and opened it just enough to look at her. "This conversation is over," I said. "If you come back again, I will document it." Her eyes widened. "You would do that to your own mother." "I didn't start this," I said, "but I will finish it." I closed the door. I locked it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. That night, Mark posted a photo on social media. A champagne glass held up against a blurred background of what looked like a construction site. Caption, "Big moves coming, trust the process." I stared at the image. He hadn't sold anything yet. He hadn't secured a cent. But he was already spending the money in his head. That was the moment I understood. He wasn't going to stop, which meant I could not just block him. I had to end him. Not physically, not emotionally. Legally. Methodically. Completely. I opened my laptop one more time and sent Laura a single sentence. "I'm ready to proceed." Her reply came back almost immediately. "Good. Tomorrow we build the trap." I closed the laptop and turned off the lights. Outside, the street was quiet, peaceful. Inside, a war had begun. And this time I was not fighting for approval. I was fighting for my name. The trap didn't start with confrontation. It started with silence. For 3 days after my mother showed up at my door, I said nothing. I didn't answer calls. I didn't return messages. I went to work, cooked dinner, went to the gym, lived my life as if the ground beneath me wasn't being quietly mined by people who shared my last name. That silence did exactly what Laura predicted. It made Mark reckless. On the 4th morning, Laura forwarded me a message from Silverline Title. The subject line was bland, bureaucratic, almost boring. Verification update. Inside was the kind of information that made my pulse quicken in a very specific way. The way it does when a pattern locks into place. Mark had logged into the title portal twice the night before, once just after 9 p.m, once again at almost midnight, both times from the same location. A public wireless network tied to a coffee shop less than 5 miles from my parents' house. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was scrambling. Silverline's fraud team had requested additional verification from the seller of record. They had not canceled the transaction. They had not accused anyone. They had simply placed a hold and asked for clarification. To Mark, that would look like a hurdle. One he believed he could jump with enough confidence and pressure. Laura called me an hour later. "He's pushing for a mobile signing," she said. "He wants to bypass the office, claims it'll make things easier for you." Of course he did. Mobile signings were intimate, informal. They happened in kitchens and living rooms over coffee and reassurances. No cameras, no waiting rooms, no other clients within earshot. Home field advantage. "Let him," I said. Laura paused. "Are you sure?" "He thinks that's where he has power," I replied. "That's exactly where I want him." She exhaled softly. "All right. But if we do this, we do it clean. I'll coordinate with Silverline. They'll send a senior verifier, not a notary. Everything will be recorded." I pictured my parents' dining room table. the same one where Mark had announced the future like it was a press release. Yes, I said, that's perfect. The next move came from Mark himself. He called that afternoon. I watched his name flash on my screen for a long moment before answering. When I did, I let my voice sound tired, worn down, exactly what he wanted to hear. Evelyn, he said immediately. Thank God, this has gotten out of hand. I know, I said quietly. There was a pause. I could almost hear him recalibrating, sensing weakness. Look, he continued, lowering his voice. The title company is just doing their due diligence. It happens, but they need you to sign an identity affidavit to clear the hold. That's it. Once that's done, everything goes through. Goes through where I asked. To close, he said quickly. The buyer is getting impatient. If we don't act, the offer evaporates. I said nothing. He rushed to fill the silence. You won't have to do anything else. I'll handle the wires. Mom will distribute the funds. You'll get your share. My share, I repeated. Yes, he said. You'll be protected. I closed my eyes. The arrogance of that word. Okay, I said finally. I don't want this hanging over me anymore. He exhaled relief, pouring through the line. I knew you'd come around. But I have conditions, I added. Name them. We do it at Mom and Dad's house, I said. I want them there. Everyone. I don't want this to be something whispered about later. He hesitated only briefly. Of course. Transparency. Family. Exactly. And I want a professional from the title company present, I continued. No random notary. Someone official. That's overkill, he said. I won't sign otherwise. Another pause. Fine, he said. I'll arrange it. When we hung up, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from anticipation. Laura called me back within minutes. He bit, she said. Signing is scheduled for tomorrow evening. Mobile verification. Your parents' address. Good, I said. There was a beat of silence. You're calm, Laura observed. I'm focused, I replied. That night I slept better than I had since Christmas. The next day moved slowly, painfully. At work I answered emails and sat through meetings, nodding at the right moments, all while my mind ran through contingencies. What if he backed out? What if he brought his own notary anyway? What if my parents tried to stop the process once they realized what it really was? By late afternoon, Laura sent me the final confirmation. The verifier's name was Thomas Reed, senior fraud investigator, not a notary. Perfect. I drove to my parents' house just before 6, parking on the street instead of the driveway. I wanted space, options. The house looked the same as it always had. Warm lights, holiday wreath still on the door. From the outside, it could have been any family gathering. Inside it was a stage. My mother sat rigidly on the sofa, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. My father hovered near the window, pretending to check something on his phone. My aunt and uncle were there too, summoned as moral reinforcement. Mark stood near the dining table, papers laid out neatly, confidence radiating off him like cologne. There she is, he said when I walked in. Ready to put this behind us. I nodded. No one noticed the small black recorder clipped inside my bag. The doorbell rang. Mark opened it with a flourish. Thomas Reed stepped inside. He was taller than I expected, older, calm in the way men get when they've seen every version of panic and denial there is. I'm here for the verification, he said. Ms. Hart. That's me, I replied. He set his briefcase on the table and looked around the room. Before we begin, I need to state that this session is being recorded for compliance purposes. Mark's smile tightened. That won't be necessary, my father said. This is family. Thomas didn't look at him. It's mandatory. He turned to me. Ms. Hart, I'll start with you. I handed over my ID, placed my thumb on the scanner. A soft chime. Identity verified, Thomas said. Owner of record. Mark shifted his weight. Now Thomas continued, we'll need to verify the authority used to initiate the transaction. Mark straightened. That would be me. Thomas nodded. Please provide your identification. Mark did. The scanner buzzed. Once. Twice. Thomas frowned slightly. Interesting, he murmured. What Mark snapped. The biometric data associated with the power of attorney does not match either party present, Thomas said calmly. My mother gasped. That's impossible, Mark said loudly. There must be a glitch. Thomas looked up at him. There is no glitch. He turned his screen toward the room. Displayed clearly was the recorded signature, the login metadata, the IP address. This document was executed remotely. Thomas continued by someone impersonating Ms. Hart. The notary involved is currently under investigation. Silence crashed down. My father sat heavily in his chair. Mark laughed high and brittle. This is insane. Thomas's gaze didn't waver. Mr. Hart, I need you to answer one question. What? Did you know this power of attorney was forged? Mark opened his mouth. And in that moment I saw it. The realization. The trap had closed. And there was no way out. Mark didn't answer right away. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked unsure of which version of himself to deploy. The charming negotiator, the wounded son, the outraged victim. His eyes flicked from Thomas Reed to my parents, then back to me, searching for an opening that wasn't there anymore. "This is getting ridiculous," he said, finally forcing a laugh. "Evelyn must have misunderstood something. She's always been dramatic." I didn't respond. "I let Thomas handle it," Mr. Hart Thomas said evenly. "This isn't a misunderstanding. The power of attorney was executed using credentials that do not belong to Ms. Hart. The biometric data does not match her historical records. That constitutes attempted identity fraud." My mother stood up abruptly. "Fraud," she whispered. No, this can't be fraud. Mark was just helping. We all agreed." Thomas turned to her slowly. "Ma'am, did you authorize the sale of your daughter's property?" She hesitated. That hesitation was everything. We talked about options," she said weakly. "Mark said Evelyn was overwhelmed and asked him to handle it." My father cleared his throat. "This has gone far enough. Let's all calm down." Sir Thomas replied, "This process can't be calmed down. It can only move forward or escalate." Mark's jaw tightened. "You're threatening us." "I'm stating procedures," Thomas said. "Now, Mr. Hart, I'll ask again. Did you know the power of attorney was forged?" Mark looked at me then, really looked at me. There was something close to betrayal in his eyes, as if I had violated an unspoken rule by not saving him from himself. "You told them," he said quietly. "I told the truth," I replied. He shook his head. "You always had to be right, even if it burned everything down." "No," I said. "I just stopped lying to keep you comfortable." Thomas raised a hand gently. "I need an answer, Mr. Hart." Mark exhaled sharply. "I didn't forge anything. I delegated the paperwork. That's all." To whom Thomas asked. Mark's silence was deafening. My aunt shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. My father stared at the floor. My mother looked like she might faint. Thomas nodded once, typing something into his tablet. Noted. He then turned the screen toward me. "Ms. Hart, before we proceed further, there's something else you should be aware of." My stomach tightened. "The property at Maple Ridge Drive," he continued, "is listed under a revocable living trust. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said. Mark's head snapped up. "What?" Thomas nodded. "Which means even a legitimate power of attorney in your sister's personal name would not have granted authority to sell the property." The room went very still. "What do you mean?" Mark demanded. "I mean," Thomas said calmly, "this transaction could never have closed. The asset you attempted to sell was never owned in the manner you assumed." Mark stared at him, then at me. "You knew," he said slowly. "You knew it wouldn't work." "I knew you didn't know," I replied. Something in his face cracked. All that confidence, all that certainty, gone in an instant. "So you let me—" He swallowed. "You let me go this far." "I didn't let you do anything I said. You made choices." My mother let out a small, broken sound. "Evelyn, why didn't you tell us about the trust?" "Because it was none of your business," I said. "And now you know exactly why." Thomas cleared his throat. "At this point, the title company will be filing a formal fraud report. Ms. Hart, you may choose to file a criminal complaint, but that is no longer required for this process to move forward." Mark stepped back as if the air itself had pushed him. "You can't do this," he said hoarsely. "This will ruin me." My father finally looked up. "Mark," he said quietly, "what did you do?" Mark laughed then, a hollow, broken sound. "I did what I had to do. Someone had to take responsibility." "For stealing from your sister?" my aunt asked, her voice sharp. "I was borrowing," he snapped. "I was going to fix it." "By lying?" I asked. "By forging my name?" "You have everything," he shouted suddenly. "A house, a career, no kids, no obligations. You could recover." "I can't." There it was, the justification he'd been nursing all along. "I'm not your insurance policy," I said. Thomas stood and closed his briefcase. "This meeting is concluded. Further communication will come through counsel." He looked at me. "Ms. Hart, I recommend changing all access credentials immediately and placing a fraud alert with the credit bureaus." "I already have," I said. He nodded once approvingly, then left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. No one spoke. Mark sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. My mother began to cry. "Not for me, for him." "I didn't raise you to do this," she sobbed. "You raised him to expect it," I said quietly. She looked up at me, eyes red. "How can you be so cold?" I picked up my bag. "I'm not cold," I replied. "I'm done." I walked to the door. "Evelyn," my father called after me. "Where are you going?" "Home," I said. "To the house that's still mine." I paused, my hand on the knob. "This doesn't end tonight," I added, "but it does end with me." Then I left. Outside, the air was sharp and clean. I inhaled deeply. For the first time since Christmas, my chest felt light. They had taken their shot. They had missed. And now the reckoning had begun. The morning after the meeting at my parents' house, I woke up to the unfamiliar sensation of stillness. Not relief, not peace. Stillness. The kind that comes after something breaks so loudly that there's nothing left to echo. Sunlight spilled across my bedroom floor, catching the edges of the dresser and the framed photos I'd never bothered to replace. I lay there for a long moment staring at the ceiling, letting my body register what my mind already knew. The confrontation was over. The consequences were not. I reached for my phone. 16 missed calls, most from my mother, 3 from my father, 2 from an unfamiliar number I didn't need to guess belonged to Mark, 1 voicemail from my aunt, and 1 email notification from Laura. I opened Laura's message first. Silverline has formally escalated the fraud report. The notary's commission has been suspended. Your brother's name is now flagged in the underwriter network. Expect outreach from investigators. Do not engage with family directly. You did exactly what you needed to do. I exhaled slowly. So it had begun. I listened to none of the voicemails. I didn't need to hear the panic, the bargaining, the rewriting of history that was surely already underway. I knew the script by heart. Instead, I got out of bed, showered, dressed, and made breakfast. I forced myself through the motions because structure was the only thing keeping the emotions from spilling over. As I drank my coffee, my phone buzzed again. A text from Mark. You didn't have to humiliate me like that. We could have fixed this privately. Now you've destroyed everything. I stared at the message, feeling something unexpected rise in my chest. Not guilt. Sadness. Not for him. For the version of my brother I had once believed in. I typed 1 sentence. You destroyed this the moment you decided my consent didn't matter. Then I blocked his number. Blocking him didn't feel dramatic. It felt necessary, like closing a door during a storm. By mid-morning, the ripple effects began. First, my aunt called my work phone. I didn't answer. Then my cousin sent a long message about family loyalty and forgiveness. I deleted it. Then my mother sent a single line. Please, he is spiraling. I don't know how to help him. I read it twice and didn't respond. That afternoon, Laura called. There's something else, she said. It's not just the attempted sale. I closed my laptop. What now? Your brother applied for a home equity line of credit in your name, she said. It didn't go through because of the trust structure, but the inquiry is there. Combined with the forged power of attorney, this establishes a pattern. A pattern. That word mattered. What does that mean? I asked. It means this isn't a family dispute, Laura said. It's financial exploitation. And because your parents were involved even indirectly, this could escalate. I felt a tightness in my throat. I don't want them arrested. I know, Laura said gently. But understand this. The state doesn't care about intention. It cares about behavior. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the quiet street. I need time, I said. You have very little, she replied. Mark is going to try to reframe this. He's going to claim emotional distress. He may even accuse you of coercion. That made me laugh. A short, humorless sound. He accused me of ruining his life. And he will say worse, Laura warned, which is why you need to stay ahead of the narrative. That night, I finally listened to 1 voicemail, my father's. His voice sounded older than I remembered. Evelyn, he said quietly, your mother isn't well. This has taken a toll. Mark is not okay. We need to talk. I closed my eyes. They still thought this was about talking, about smoothing things over. They didn't understand that the system had already moved beyond them. The next morning, a letter arrived by certified mail, from a private lender, addressed to Mark, but mailed to my parents' house. I recognized the name immediately. It was one Laura had mentioned. A high-interest lender, aggressive, legal. I drove to my parents' house without calling ahead. When my mother opened the door, she looked smaller somehow, like the walls had finally closed in on her. You shouldn't be here, she said weakly. I know, I replied, but I need to see something. She let me in. Mark was on the couch, staring at nothing. He hadn't shaved. His hands were shaking. He looked up when he saw me. This is your fault, he said dully. I didn't respond. I walked to the kitchen table and placed the letter down. What is this? I asked my mother. She swallowed. It's a demand notice. They're calling every day. I opened it. The amount made my stomach drop. Not small, not manageable. Devastating. You borrowed this, I asked Mark. He laughed bitterly. I was going to pay it back. The house was supposed to cover it. The house you tried to steal, I said. He flinched. They're threatening to sue, my mother whispered. They said they'll come after the pension. There it was. The real leverage. Not family. Fear. I looked at Mark. You did this, I said quietly. I did this for us, he snapped. You just refused to play your part. No, I replied. I refused to disappear. My father sat down heavily. What do we do? I looked at them. All of them. And for the first time, I understood something clearly. If I stepped in now, if I saved him again, this would never end. He would learn nothing. They would learn nothing. And I would be back here in 5 years, 10 years, with a new crisis, a new betrayal. I'm not fixing this, I said. My mother's face crumpled. He's your brother, and I'm your daughter, I replied. And none of you protected me. Silence. Mark stood up abruptly. "You're enjoying this," he accused, "watching me fall." I met his gaze. "No," I said, "I'm surviving it." I walked to the door. "Evelyn," my father called after me. "If we lose everything—" "You won't," I said. "You'll lose the illusion that consequences don't apply in this family." I left without looking back. As I drove home, my hands shook on the steering wheel. Not with doubt, with grief. Because revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the moment you stop cushioning someone from the truth and let reality do what it was always going to do. The lawsuit arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under my door like a threat that had finally learned my address. I recognized the envelope before I picked it up. Thick paper. Legal weight. My name printed too neatly in the window. I stood there in the hallway of my building keys still in my hand, the hum of the elevator fading behind me, and felt the faint, almost familiar pull of dread. Mark was striking back. Inside my apartment, I set the envelope on the counter and stared at it while the coffee brewed. I refused to open it until the machine finished dripping. Small rituals mattered when everything else felt like it was sliding. When I finally tore it open, the words were exactly what Laura had warned me about. Civil complaint, allegations of emotional distress, interference with economic opportunity, defamation. I read it twice, then a third time, waiting for anger to arrive. It didn't. What I felt instead was exhaustion. Mark was doing what he had always done when cornered. He was flipping the script, casting himself as the victim of my supposed cruelty, hoping that noise and confusion would blur the facts. He didn't need to win. He just needed to overwhelm. I picked up my phone and called Laura. "He filed," I said. "I know," she replied calmly. "I was served this morning." "Of course you were." "Evelyn," she continued, "this actually helps us." I leaned against the counter. "How?" "Because he put his version of events on record," she said. "And it's inconsistent with the documents. Very inconsistent." I closed my eyes. "So we let him talk," I said. "Exactly," Laura replied. "We let him tell his story, and then we show the receipts." The first hearing was scheduled quickly. Too quickly. Mark wanted momentum. He wanted to look proactive, righteous wounded. I almost admired the audacity. Almost. In the days leading up to the hearing, my parents stopped calling. That silence felt different from the earlier ones. It wasn't tactical. It was frightened. They had finally realized this was no longer something they could manage from the sidelines. My mother sent one text. "He says you're trying to ruin him. Please tell me that's not true." I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied, "I'm letting him ruin himself." The courthouse was smaller than I expected. Beige walls, low ceilings, a waiting area that smelled faintly of stale coffee and anxiety. Mark was already there when I arrived, sitting with a lawyer who looked younger than both of us and significantly less confident. Mark didn't look at me. Good. When we were called in, I took my seat across from him, my posture straight, my expression neutral. Laura sat beside me, a slim folder in her hands. Mark's lawyer began with a dramatic summary of my supposed betrayal. The language was emotional, loaded, deliberately vague. He spoke of family breakdown, of humiliation, of opportunities destroyed by malice. I listened quietly. When it was our turn, Laura stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't embellish. She simply laid out the timeline. The forged power of attorney, the attempted sale, the failed biometric verification, the trust ownership, the credit inquiry, the demand letter from the private lender, the social media posts celebrating a deal that never legally existed. The judge leaned forward. Mark shifted in his seat. Laura finished by placing one document on the table. A screenshot. Mark's own message to me, sent after the signing attempt. "If you don't fix this, everything falls apart." The judge looked at Mark. "Mr. Hart," she said, "this court does not consider fraud prevention to be defamation." Mark's lawyer opened his mouth. The judge raised a hand. "Furthermore," she continued, "the plaintiff's actions appear to have triggered the scrutiny he now complains of." She dismissed the complaint. Just like that. Mark didn't look angry. He looked stunned. Outside the courtroom, he finally spoke to me. "You think this is over," he said quietly. "It's not." I met his eyes. "I know," I said. "That's the difference between us." That evening, I received an email from Silverline. The fraud referral had been accepted by the state. An investigation was officially open. Mark was out of moves. And he knew it. 2 days later, Harper called me. Her voice was thin, shaking. "He's blaming me," she said. "He says I ruined everything, that I tricked him into trusting me." I closed my eyes. "He used you," I replied, "just like he used all of us." "They want me to testify," she whispered. "I don't know what to do." "Tell the truth," I said. "It's the only thing that doesn't cost interest." She cried then, not loud, just broken. When the call ended, I sat alone in my living room and stared at the wall. I thought about all the times I had been asked to be patient, to be understanding, to give Mark one more chance. I thought about how close I had come to losing my home, my credit, my sense of self. And I understood something important. This wasn't revenge. This was accountability. The next letter came a week later. Not from a lawyer. From my mother. It was handwritten. She apologized. Not fully, not cleanly, but honestly enough to hurt. She admitted she had known more than she let on. That she had been afraid. That she had chosen peace over truth and paid for it. She ended with one line. I don't know who we are now. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Neither did I. But I knew who I wasn't anymore. I wasn't the quiet sister. I wasn't the safety net. And I wasn't done yet. Because justice doesn't always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it arrives slowly. One document, one decision, one refusal at a time. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Not in loud ways, not with flashing lights or urgent phone calls. It moved in paperwork and silence, in formal letters and carefully worded emails that arrived with unnerving calm. The kind of calm that told you decisions were being made without asking for your feelings. Laura warned me this would happen. When institutions decide you're right, she said, they stop negotiating. The first call came from the State Fraud Division on a Thursday afternoon, while I was in the middle of a routine compliance meeting at work. I stepped into an empty conference room, closed the door, and sat down. Ms. Hart, the investigator said, her voice measured professional. We're following up on the title fraud referral. I just need to confirm a few details. I answered every question slowly, clearly. I did not embellish. I did not vent. I did not explain my family dynamics. I gave facts, dates, documents, names. When she asked if I suspected anyone else was involved, I hesitated only a moment. My parents were aware of the transaction, I said. I do not believe they understood the legal implications, but they participated. There was a pause on the line. Thank you for your honesty, she said. That matters. After I hung up, I stayed seated for several minutes, staring at the whiteboard on the wall. My reflection stared back faintly from the glass. Calm, controlled. This was the part people didn't talk about when they romanticized revenge. The quiet weight of telling the truth when the truth implicated people you once loved. That evening, my father called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me this wasn't another plea. Evelyn, he said when I picked up. His voice was tired in a way I had never heard before. They served us. I closed my eyes. Served you with what I asked. Subpoenas, he said, for records, bank statements, communications. My chest tightened. They're looking into the wire instructions, he continued. Your mother's account. I didn't say anything. I should have stopped this, he said quietly. I thought if it worked, it would all go away. And if it didn't, I asked. Another pause. We thought you'd forgive us, he admitted. There it was. The assumption that had driven everything. That I would absorb the damage because I always had. I can't fix this, I said gently. And I won't lie for you. I know, he replied. I just needed to hear it. When the call ended, I sat in the dark for a long time. I didn't cry. I felt hollow. A few days later, Mark was arrested. Not dramatically. No scene, no resistance. A quiet pickup outside his apartment building early in the morning. One of my neighbors texted me the news before Laura could. I didn't respond. The charges were what Laura predicted. Attempted fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. Harper cooperated fully. Her testimony confirmed the forged signatures, the pressure Mark applied, the narrative he created to justify everything. She texted me once afterward. I'm sorry, I didn't know how to stop him. I replied with one sentence. You stopped when it mattered. My mother didn't call. She didn't text. She sent another letter. This one shorter, more fragile. They took him away this morning. I don't know how to breathe. I read it once, then folded it and placed it next to the first. I didn't know how to comfort her without betraying myself. That weekend I went through my house room by room. Not to check for damage, not to pack, but to reclaim it. I opened drawers I hadn't opened in months. I rearranged books. I replaced the cheap lock on the back door with a better one. I changed the Wi-Fi password again, even though I knew it was unnecessary. Each small act felt like stitching myself back together. On Sunday afternoon, I sat on the floor of my living room back against the couch and thought about how close I had come to losing everything. Not just the house, my name, my credibility, my future. All because the people closest to me had decided I was expendable. The sentencing came later, months later. I didn't attend. Laura went in my place. She told me afterward that Mark looked smaller, quieter. No speeches, no theatrics. Just a man finally forced to sit inside the consequences he had spent his life avoiding. My parents avoided me during that time, not out of anger, out of shame, and that was its own kind of punishment. One evening after everything was finalized, I received a call from my mother. I understand now, she said softly. Why you were always so careful. Why you kept things to yourself. I listened. I thought independence meant distance, she continued. I didn't realize it was protection. I said nothing. I don't expect forgiveness, she said, but I needed you to know that I see you. Finally, when the call ended, I sat in silence. It wasn't closure, but it was acknowledgement, and that was enough for now. Because the truth was this: revenge didn't feel like triumph. It felt like balance, like a system correcting itself after years of quiet imbalance. I didn't win. I survived, and in doing so, I learned the most important lesson of my life. You don't owe your future to people who tried to mortgage it without asking. And sometimes the most powerful act of revenge is refusing to disappear. There were still chapters ahead, but for the first time they would be written by me. Life did not return to normal after Mark was sentenced. It reorganized itself, quietly, deliberately. With a kind of precision I had once reserved only for work, I stopped waiting for things to settle and started deciding how I wanted the aftermath to look. The first thing I did was take time off, not a vacation, not an escape. Time. 3 full weeks where I didn't answer emails, didn't open my laptop, didn't explain myself to anyone. I told my manager the truth in one sentence. I was closing a chapter that required my full attention. She didn't ask questions. When you've spent years being competent, people learn when not to interfere. The days were slow at first. I woke up without alarms. I cooked meals instead of eating whatever was fastest. I walked the same quiet loop around my neighborhood every morning past houses that looked just like mine, each holding secrets no one else could see. That was the strange comfort of it. My story wasn't unique. What was unique was that I had survived it intact. Halfway through the first week, Laura called. "There's one more thing," she said. "It's optional, but I'd be negligent if I didn't mention it." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Go on." "You're eligible to file a civil recovery claim," she said. "Damages, legal fees, emotional distress." I closed my eyes. Even after everything, the word damages made me uncomfortable, like I was reaching for something I hadn't earned. "What happens if I don't?" I asked. "Nothing," she replied. "You walk away, clean, untangled. And if I do, you force him to confront the full cost of what he did," she said gently, "not just legally, personally." I thought about Mark sitting in that courtroom, shoulders hunched, finally silent. I thought about the letter my mother had written, the words she still couldn't quite say aloud. I thought about the trust document I had signed years earlier, never imagining it would save me from my own family. "I need to think," I said. That night I dreamed of my childhood bedroom, the one with the pale yellow walls my mother had chosen because she thought it would make me happier. I was standing in the doorway watching my younger self sit on the bed, knees pulled to her chest, listening to raised voices in the kitchen. In the dream she looked up at me. "Why didn't anyone stop it?" she asked. I woke up with my heart racing, and I knew my answer. I filed the claim, not out of spite, out of clarity. The paperwork took less than an hour. Laura handled the rest. When it was done, I felt something loosen inside me, like I had finally completed a sentence that had been trailing off for decades. My parents found out a week later. My father called. "This will destroy him," he said quietly. I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, breathing. "He destroyed himself," I replied. "I'm just no longer pretending it didn't cost me." There was no argument after that, only resignation. In the weeks that followed, something unexpected happened. People started telling me the truth. My cousin admitted she had always known Mark was lying about money. My aunt confessed she'd been afraid of crossing my mother. A former coworker shared her own story of family betrayal over property and inheritance. Each confession landed softly like a hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone," they seemed to say. "You never were." One afternoon I received a message from Harper. "I've been offered immunity in exchange for testimony in another case. I'm moving away, starting over. Thank you for not protecting the lie." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back. "Protecting the truth protects more people than silence ever does." She responded with a single heart emoji. It was enough. The house felt different now. Not haunted, not heavy. Claimed. I repainted the hallway a deeper, warmer shade. I replaced the dining table the same size but sturdier, less delicate. I framed the trust documents and placed them in a locked drawer, not out of fear but out of respect. This was the architecture of my future. One evening as autumn settled in, my mother came by. She didn't bring food. She didn't bring apologies. She brought nothing but herself. We sat at the kitchen table in silence for a long time before she spoke. "I'm not asking to be let back in," she said quietly. "I just want to understand who you are now." I looked at her, at the lines I had inherited, at the hands that had once braided my hair and later signed documents without reading them. "I'm someone who doesn't disappear anymore," I said. She nodded slowly. "I wish I had been braver," she whispered. "So do I replied. When she left, I didn't feel drained. I felt finished. That night, I stood in my living room with the lights off, looking out at the street. Cars passed, lives continued. Somewhere, Mark was learning what silence felt like when no one rushed in to save him. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt space. Room to build something that wasn't defined by reaction or defense. Room to choose. The story people would tell about me might still paint me as cold, unforgiving, harsh. I didn't care. I had learned that being liked was a poor substitute for being safe. And for the first time in my life, safety wasn't something I borrowed from good behavior. It was something I owned. Chapter 9 didn't end with peace. It ended with ownership. And that I was learning was far more powerful. Ownership changes the way you breathe. I noticed it first in small moments. Standing in line at the bank without rehearsing explanations. Opening mail without bracing for impact. Letting my phone ring without assuming it was a crisis looking for a place to land. When you stop being the family's safety net, gravity recalibrates. The civil recovery moved forward quietly. There were no dramatic hearings, no public scenes, just filings, responses, numbers. Mark's attorney reached out once proposing a settlement that read like an apology written by a calculator. Laura forwarded it to me with a single note. "Your call." I read it carefully. The offer acknowledged wrongdoing without admitting fault. It proposed a payment plan stretched thin over years. It asked politely for mercy. I didn't feel angry. I felt decisive. "No," I told Laura. "We proceed." She didn't question it. 2 days later, my father showed up unannounced. I saw his car through the front window and felt that familiar tightening, the old reflex to prepare myself. But it loosened quickly. I wasn't bracing anymore. I was choosing. I opened the door. He looked older than he had the last time I'd seen him. Not frail, just stripped of certainty. He held his hands together like he was trying to keep them from shaking. "I won't come in," he said. "I just needed to talk." We stood on the porch, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the steps. "I read the filings," he said. "All of them." I waited. "You were right," he continued. "About the trust, about the risk, about everything." I nodded once. "I failed you," he said quietly. "I protected peace instead of justice. And I taught your brother the wrong lesson." That was more than I'd ever heard him say. "I'm not here to ask you to stop," he added quickly. "I know better than that now." I studied his face, searching for the familiar manipulation. I didn't find it. "I just wanted you to know," he said, "that whatever happens next, I accept it." When he left, I didn't feel relief. I felt something steadier. Respect. Not the kind that demands reconciliation, the kind that allows distance without bitterness. The hearing on damages was scheduled for late winter. In the meantime, my life kept unfolding. I went back to work, but differently. I stopped volunteering for extra projects that earned praise but no protection. I declined meetings that didn't require my presence. I said no without explaining. To my surprise, nothing collapsed. In fact, things improved. Boundaries, it turned out, were excellent time managers. One afternoon, my manager called me into her office. "I want to talk about your future here," she said. I sat down calm. "We're restructuring," she continued, "and there's a leadership role opening up. Compliance oversight, more authority, more visibility." I raised an eyebrow. "You know I don't love visibility." She smiled. "I know. That's why you'd be good at it." I asked for a week to think. That night I walked through my house slowly, room by room. The walls felt solid, familiar, earned. Visibility had always scared me because it invited entitlement, scrutiny, people thinking they had a claim. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I was deliberate. I accepted the role. The hearing arrived quietly, like everything else had. I didn't attend again. Laura represented me. She called afterward, her voice measured but warm. "The court awarded damages," she said, "full recovery, legal fees included." I closed my eyes. "And Mark? He has obligations now," she replied. "Real ones. Ones that won't be softened by family narratives." I thanked her and hung up. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A message from my mother. I heard. "I won't ask you to change anything. I just hope one day we can talk without pain." I stared at the screen. Then I typed back. "One day, not today." Winter came and went. Spring followed. The house bloomed with it. Light shifted. Windows opened. Air moved through rooms that had once felt sealed shut. I hosted a small dinner for friends' chosen family, people who knew the story and never once asked me to minimize it. We laughed. We ate too much. Someone spilled wine on the rug and no one panicked. After they left, I stood alone in the kitchen listening to the quiet. Not the heavy quiet of before. The earned kind. I thought about Mark sometimes, not with anger, with distance. He existed now as a consequence, not a gravitational force. That distinction mattered. One evening, months later, I received a letter from him, handwritten, short. I read it once. He didn't apologize. Not really. He explained, he rationalized, he asked for understanding without offering accountability. I folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer with the others. Some chapters don't need responses. They need endings. As summer approached, I took a weekend trip alone. No agenda, no itinerary, just space. On the last night, I sat on a balcony overlooking a quiet street and realized something profound. I wasn't thinking about them. Not my parents. Not my brother. Not the case. I was thinking about the next 5 years, what I wanted to build, who I wanted nearby, what silence I was willing to tolerate, and what noise I would never again mistake for love. It didn't arrive with the victory lap. It arrived with direction, with a spine, with the understanding that closure isn't a moment. It's a practice, and I was finally fluent. The call came on a Tuesday morning, the kind that pretends to be ordinary. Unknown number, local area code, no voicemail left the first time. I let it ring. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Something in my chest tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. This wasn't panic knocking, it was consequence circling back. I answered. "Hi," a woman said. Her voice was professional, careful. "Is this Evelyn Hart?" "Yes." "My name is Naomi Keller. I'm a court-appointed mediator. I've been asked to reach out regarding a family estate matter involving your grandmother's amended will." I leaned back in my chair. "My grandmother passed away 3 years ago," I said. The estate was settled. There was a pause. Papers shifting. "That's what everyone believed," Naomi replied. But new documentation surfaced last month. A codicil. Properly notarized, properly filed. It changes things. Changes. I closed my eyes. Changes what I asked. "Beneficiaries," she said. "Control and intent." I didn't speak. "Your brother has filed a petition to contest enforcement," Naomi continued. "He claims undue influence. He claims coercion." "Of course he did." "And you?" she asked. "You're listed as the primary executor." The word landed like a weight and a gift at the same time. "I didn't know," I said honestly. "That's consistent with the document," she replied. "It was sealed with instructions to release only under specific circumstances. Those circumstances have now been met." I knew exactly what those circumstances were. Betrayal had consequences beyond the present. "I'll send you the file," Naomi said. "You'll want legal counsel." "I already have it," I replied. When the email arrived, I didn't open it right away. I sat there letting the moment settle. My grandmother had always been quiet, observant, the kind of woman who watched patterns instead of arguments. She used to say very little at family dinners, just smiled and passed dishes, but her eyes missed nothing. I had been the one she slipped extra food onto the plate of, the one she asked real questions, the one she hugged longer than necessary. I opened the file. The codicil was dated 6 months before her death. It cited concerns about financial manipulation, entitlement, and patterns of dependency. It named my brother directly. It named my parents indirectly. And then it named me, not just as beneficiary, as protector. The estate had been placed into a charitable trust with conditions. If my brother maintained employment for 2 consecutive years without financial assistance from family, he would receive a stipend. If my parents ceased co-signing debts or transferring funds, they would retain access to their residence. If those conditions were violated, assets would be redirected to women's legal aid organizations focused on financial abuse. I sat very still. This wasn't revenge. This was foresight. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Neutral location, glass conference room, cameras, recorders. Everyone would be there. Laura prepared me carefully. "This isn't about winning," she said. "It's about clarity. The document is solid. The challenge will fail." "What about the emotional fallout?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "That's not a legal issue." The morning of the meeting, I dressed simply. No armor, no performance, just myself. They arrived before I did. I saw them through the glass. My parents sat close together, tense. My brother leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, jaw set. He looked older, not wiser, just worn. When I entered, the room shifted. Naomi began the session with ground rules. "Respect, no interruptions, facts over feelings." She summarized the codicil. By the time she finished, my brother was red. "This is insane," he said. "She was sick. She didn't know what she was doing." "She knew exactly what she was doing," Naomi replied calmly. "The document includes a cognitive assessment. She was manipulated," he snapped, pointing at me. "By her." I met his eyes. "I didn't know this existed," I said. "You know that." "You always knew," he said. "You were always her favorite." "That's not favoritism," I replied quietly. "That's discernment." My mother spoke then, her voice brittle. "Why would she do this to us?" she asked. "Why punish her own family?" Naomi didn't answer. "I did. She didn't punish us," I said. "She protected herself and others." Silence. My father looked at the table. "She warned me," he said finally. "She told me this would happen if we didn't stop." Everyone turned to him. "I didn't listen," he continued. "I thought keeping the peace mattered more." My brother laughed bitterly. "So that's it," he said. "I'm cut off unless I become someone else." "No," I said. "You're supported if you become accountable." "That's control," he shot back. "No," I replied. "That's boundaries." The mediator concluded what everyone already knew. The challenge would not proceed. The codicil would be enforced. As we stood to leave, my mother reached for my arm. "Please," she whispered. "We've lost enough." I looked at her. "No," I said gently. "We've just stopped losing the wrong things." Outside, the air felt clean. Laura walked beside me. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and meant it. That night I sat alone again, not lonely. I thought about my grandmother, about quiet strength, about choosing justice without spectacle. Revenge, I realized, didn't always roar. Sometimes it rearranged the future so abuse could no longer thrive. One chapter left, and it wouldn't be about them at all. The last thing my grandmother ever gave me wasn't money. It was permission. Permission to stop fixing what I didn't break. Permission to stop translating cruelty into family dynamics. Permission to let consequences speak in a language louder than love ever had. I didn't realize that right away. It took months. After the mediation, life didn't explode into peace. It settled. Slowly. Unevenly. Like dust after a demolition you didn't ask for but desperately needed. My brother stopped calling. At first, that absence felt sharp, like silence pressed into a wound. Then it softened. Then it became neutral. Eventually, it became background. My mother sent messages every few weeks. Recipes, articles, photos of flowers in her yard. None of them mentioned the trust. None of them mentioned the conditions. None of them mentioned responsibility. I responded politely, briefly, without explanations. Distance, I learned, doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be consistent. I stayed in my job for another year, long enough to complete the restructuring I'd helped design. When the board asked what I wanted next, I surprised myself by answering honestly. Less. Less urgency, less exposure, less being needed. I left corporate work quietly. No announcement, no farewell tour. I transitioned into consulting, choosing clients instead of inheriting their chaos. I worked fewer hours. I slept more. I cooked real meals. I learned what my body sounded like when it wasn't bracing. One afternoon, while organizing old files, I found a photo of myself from years earlier. Late 20s, exhausted eyes, jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt proud. She survived long enough to become me. The trust administration took time. I met with the board once a quarter. I read reports. I approved grants. I learned the stories of women who were rebuilding after financial manipulation, inheritance theft, silent coercion. Their stories were different from mine, and exactly the same. I never told them my name. I didn't need to. This wasn't about recognition. It was about interruption, about breaking patterns quietly enough that no one could accuse you of revenge-only results. One letter stayed with me. A woman in her 60s, divorced late, adult children who sided with her ex-husband. She wrote about starting over in a small apartment, about learning to trust her own judgment again. At the end, she wrote, "I forgot what it felt like to own my decisions. Thank you for reminding me." I sat with that sentence for a long time. Ownership isn't possession, it's authorship. That winter, my father called. We hadn't spoken since the mediation. "I'm not asking you to come for the holidays," he said. "I just wanted to tell you, your mother is in counseling." I waited. "She's angry," he added. "Not at you, at herself." That was new. "I'm glad," I said, and meant it. He hesitated. "I'm proud of you." It wasn't redemption, but it was real. I didn't go home for Christmas. Instead, I hosted a small dinner at my place. A neighbor, 2 friends, one woman I'd met through the trust who had become something like family. We cooked together. We talked about books and plans and weather. At one point, someone asked how we all knew each other. I smiled. Different chapters, same ending. Later that night, after everyone left, I washed the dishes slowly. No rush, no noise in my head. I thought about how revenge stories usually end. With fireworks, with humiliation, with someone standing in ruins, pointing at the wreckage and calling it justice. That wasn't my ending. My ending was quieter. My brother still lived with the consequences of his choices. My parents still lived with the truth they had avoided. And I lived with neither. I lived forward. I took a trip the following spring. Just me. No itinerary, no emergency contacts who felt like obligations. I walked unfamiliar streets, ate alone without distraction, Let myself be anonymous. One evening, sitting in a cafe, I overheard two women talking at the next table. One said, "I just wish I'd stood up for myself sooner." I didn't turn around. I smiled into my coffee. Because sooner is a myth. There is only when you are ready, and ready is never late. On the flight home, I wrote something in my notebook. Not for anyone else, just for me. I am not responsible for maintaining systems that require my silence to function. I underlined it twice. When I unlocked my front door, the familiar quiet greeted me. Not empty, complete. I set down my bag. I opened the windows. I stood in the middle of the room and breathed. Deeply. Fully. Unapologetically. The story didn't end with forgiveness. It ended with sovereignty. And if you're listening to this wondering whether justice ever arrives quietly, whether standing your ground without cruelty still counts as revenge, let me tell you this. The most devastating payback isn't destruction. It's being unreachable. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the responsible one, the overlooked one, the one expected to absorb the cost of everyone else's choices, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments. Like this video if it spoke to you. Subscribe if you believe karma doesn't need permission. And remember, always check your paperwork, but more importantly, always check your worth. This was my story, and I finally own it.